This is Eitan Weinstein.
And I'm Naor Menninger, and you're listening to Two Nice Jewish Boys.
This podcast is sponsored by The Forward. Stay up to date with unlimited access to news, culture, and opinion all through a Jewish lens. And for our listeners, for 2NJB listeners, get 6 months of The Forward for $15. An exclusive subscription offer for our listeners, forward.com/2NJB, and get 6 months for $15. Also in collaboration with Arutz Sheva, IsraelNationalNews.com. And last but not least, in collaboration with Australian Jewish News, check them out at ajn.timesofisrael.com. Back in 2018, President Trump made a bold move when he exited the Iran nuclear deal and leveled crippling sanctions on the Iranians. Iran, in retaliation, cranked up its uranium enrichment. Well, at least they no longer hid it. Last week, in a quiet corner of Vienna, the U.S. began back-channel negotiations with Tehran with the aim of reentering what is officially known as the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action. Talks are set to continue this week. Yesterday, Natanz nuclear facility in Iran experienced a devastating power outage, which experts are saying has set back Iran's nuclear goals by about 9 months. And guess who most are saying is responsible? Dan Shiftan is the head of the National Securities Studies Center.
It sounds like you say that Dan Shiftan is the most responsible.
Well, maybe we'll find that out. But Dan Shiftan is the head of the National Securities Studies Center at the University of Haifa.
Correction?
Not really.
He is not.
The head of the International National Security Graduate Program at the University of Haifa.
I see. But are you responsible for Natanz?
I wish I were. Well, as being part of the Jewish people, I hope.
Partly. You have a part in it.
I have.
So just let's finish the introduction.
So he has taught at the IDF National Security College and Command and Staff College. He was an advisor to Israel's National Security Council and former Prime Ministers Yitzhak Rabin and Ariel Sharon. He's also the author of several books and articles on issues pertaining to Israel's national security. And he joins us today for the second time on the podcast to talk about the Iranian threat. We're thrilled to welcome Dan Shiftan to the podcast. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Delighted.
And for suffering us.
It's okay. Again, I'm a Jew. I suffer. Okay? That's what we do.
It's part of your destiny. I see. So before we get to it, we have a sponsor.
Yes.
Right? We have a sponsor which is also an Israel lover, just like us. If you're listening, you probably have some interest in Israel, guys. Check out masaisrael.org/TWO Nice Jewish Boys, masaisrael.org/2 Nice Jewish Boys. They have great opportunities. You come to Israel, you live out your passions, you can explore your career path, and you can make a real positive impact on the world. During the pandemic, Masa also created options to study and work in Israel, but remotely. So you can come here. You don't have to actually go into the office or anything, but you can study and work remotely. You don't have to learn Hebrew. You don't have to pause your life. Check it out. You get funding if you apply. So check out masaisrael.org/2 Nice Jewish Boys. Check them out.
So what happened yesterday, Professor Shiftan?
Let's get to yesterday somewhat later. Let me start with the overview of Iran, and then we can understand specific issues. We used to have the Arab-Israeli conflict, and the major advantage that Israel had with the Arab-Israeli conflict is that the Arabs are, how can I put it very politely, incapable of meeting the challenges of the 20th and 21st century. So on the one hand, we had a huge enemy when Arab states cooperated with each other in fighting us. We had major armies, very, very large armies. But the Arabs are basically weak because they have a weak society, and this reflected itself also in the armies. And whereas it was difficult to win them, nevertheless, in the final analysis, if you look for 100 years, about our confrontation with the Arabs, we managed to win time and again, not only because we are so good, but also because they're so bad, because they're so weak. Now we have a completely different enemy. The Iranians remind me of the Israelis, and this is what is frightening. When I'm looking at Iran today, I'm reminded of Israel in the 80s and the 90s. They didn't catch up with us. We're still much stronger than they are, but this is a nation of 80 million people. This is a nation that has enormous capabilities. Believe it or not, even under the mullahs, they have some pluralistic elements in their society. They're impressive. They have science, they have technology. They're building weapons. They're the world #1 expert in reverse engineering. They capture weapons of their enemies and then they copy it, and they're very good at it. And they challenge us in a very real way. And here is the interesting paradox. As Israelis who were confronting Arabs, we always wanted the Arabs to be weak. Now the Arabs are so weak, they're too weak from an Israeli point of view. I mean, I wish the Arabs were stronger. If the Arabs were stronger today, the Egyptians, the Saudis, the Emiratis, the Bahrainis, and so on, they could oppose Iran much more effectively. The point is that you have a very strong power in the region, Iran, and the Iranians understand how weak the Arabs are, and the Iranians are capable and are willing and are eager and are committed to hegemonize the Middle East. Namely, the Arabs are so weak that the Iranians will take them over. Now, it doesn't mean Iran will occupy the entire region. They're very good in using proxies. Look at what they're doing in Lebanon, in Syria, in Iraq, in Yemen. They're very, very sophisticated. Unlike the Arabs, they have a lot of patience. They build things slowly with a good infrastructure, and one day you get up in the morning, it's too late. So there's a very real danger that they will hegemonize this region because of the weakness of the Arabs.
Can I stop you for a second to ask a question, please? Or is there a...
Let me just finish here because I want to give the overall picture, and then we can get into specific issues. If they hegemonize the whole region, they control the oil, the gas, the maritime pathways, Suez Canal, others, the Persian Gulf. They may control Saudi Arabia and control Mecca and Medina, and this is perhaps not something tangible, but tremendously important. And if this is what you can command from Tehran, then Iran is not just a Middle Eastern power. Then the Europeans are threatened. I mean, the Europeans will not recognize it because they live in La La Land. But this is the kind of power that can threaten Europe. I mean, the Iranians are building now missiles that can reach Europe. And they're building nuclear weapons. So we're speaking about something that can become a power far beyond the Middle East. And when Europe is a non-entity, it doesn't exist. And when you have nice guys sitting in the White House, then what's to stop the Iranians except the Israelis? And here is the interesting thing. Everything bad and a lot of good things come from the fact that the only people who are willing and able to fight the Iranians are the Israelis. The bad thing is, the Iranians consider us our enemies, not only because they are barbarian and anti-Semitic, but also because we are a real obstacle to their ambitions. The bad thing is that because Europe is non-existent and America is sometimes feeble, the Iranians can do more or less what they want. The good news is that the Arabs understand that the only thing standing between them and Iranian domination is Israel. And this explains not only the Emirates and Bahrain and Sudan and Morocco, but also Egypt. They understand, everybody in Saudi Arabia, everybody understands that if you don't want to be dominated by the Iranian barbarians, You need to work with Israel. And therefore, the Arab-Israeli conflict, the way we've known it for more than 100 years, is now fading away. Do we have radical Arabs who are enemies of Israel? Yes. The Palestinians are always committed to the destruction of Israel, and I expect...
We even have members of Knesset committed to the destruction of Israel.
We even have members of Knesset that openly say that Israel is an illegitimate entity.
Yeah. Ra'am today announced they will not forfeit their anti-Zionist charter. Which
yes,
is
but
just...
you see, it's not just anti-Zionist. These people are also anti-Semitic.
Yeah.
I mean, if you go to the Muslim Brothers, if you go to Gaza, they're openly speaking about the protocols of the Elders of Zion. Okay? So, yes, we have a lot of animosity in the Arab world. Yes, a large portion of Arab public opinion is very hostile to Israel. Yes, the elites are more radical than the everyday man in the street. But what we used to have, namely the Arabs fighting Israel, the Arabs boycotting Israel, the Arabs unwilling to work openly with Israel even when they clandestinely depend on Israel. This is no longer there. Namely, there is another option that for the time being does not engulf the whole Arab world, but nevertheless is an important force in the Arab world that is not only willing to actually cooperate with Israel, but is willing to openly cooperate with Israel and tell the Palestinians and other radicals, look, if you want to continue to suffer, be our guests, but we are not going to suffer with you. We are going to cooperate with the people who are on our side against our enemies. So that's the big picture. In this big picture now, we can discuss the nuclear issue and what happened yesterday and electricity and whatever you want, and terrorism. But this is the overall picture, and everything must be understood in this context.
I want another big picture.
Okay.
It's going to be a while before you get to ask your question. Okay. But what is because what you're doing is setting up like a paradigm for how to look at the situation. And I'm sure that there are counter paradigms, right? There's people who, like the beautiful man that you have a picture of here.
You mean dumb people?
Yeah, dumb people.
Okay.
But you have a picture of one of them here on your bookshelf. Mm-hmm. So I assume that you are well acquainted with the thoughts of these counter paradigms. Well, there's a picture, but now it's not okay to say who it is because then we'll give away our bias. Although I think it's pretty clear now. It's Obama. Okay. So I'm sure there's a counter paradigm, right? That, for example, Obama held when he was approaching these nuclear deals. How does he view the Middle East and Iran and the Arabs?
You must again see it in a broader picture. Obama is what Moshe Dayan used to call a good guy in the bad sense of the term. Namely, a guy that is so good that he should be a poet, he should be a social worker, he should
have a podcast. Oh, wait a minute. He has a podcast now.
He should be a community worker in Chicago, okay? But if you're a social worker, you don't belong in the White House. Or if I may use, I don't know if you're allowed to use profanities on your program, but I will about Obama, and I really apologize, he's a European. This is the worst thing you can say.
But a reality TV host, it's okay in the White House. That's fine.
Look, if you have some kind of actor sitting in the White House, or you have somebody who used to sell shirts in the White House, okay? The question is, what do you do when you're sitting in the White House, okay? And Trump did a lot of things that I don't like, and I definitely don't like his personality. But when it comes to the Middle East, with one exception concerning Turkey, I think he did the right thing.
I think, though, weirdly, though, you guys would get along, I feel like, you and Trump. I think you guys would click.
I don't think so.
You don't think so?
No, I don't think so. Because Being rude is only part of what I am. Okay. In other words, it is something that I enjoy.
Yeah.
But
it has to be said that you passed it down clearly. There's a plaque on your desk here that reads, "Father, you are not an example for anything."
Yeah,
Avital.
This comes from a very smart daughter, smart daughter, that understands that, certain things that apply to me don't apply to others.
Okay. And so back to Eitan's question, you're saying basically...
He has no perspective?
No. He has a very clear perspective, and that's exactly what's frightening. Look, Obama is a person that I would like very much to have as my friend, the kind of person Obama is, my neighbor, my
social
colleague,
worker.
My colleague in the PTA, up to the 5th grade, approximately. And he's a nice guy. But nice guys should be poets.
Joe also is a nice guy, by the way.
Yes, but you see, I don't think Biden is as bad as Obama in the sense that he doesn't have an ideology that he's committed to, an ideology of abdicating the role of America as the leader of the free world.
So he's like a pragmatist.
Let me, again, answer in a broader way. You know that European monarchs used to add to their title the title Defendor Fide, namely the defender of the faith. When you are the President of the United States, ex officio, by the fact that you're sitting in the White House, you are Defender Liberty. Because were it not for the United States, you and I would not live in freedom. Were it not for the United States willing to save the world from the Hitlers and the Mussolinis and the Stalins and the what have you, we will not be free people, okay? Freedom depends on the United States. And when you're the President of the United States and you abdicate the role of the United States as the defender of the free, okay, then I think you don't belong there. Now again, in terms of personality, he's bright, he's cool, he's sophisticated, he's educated.
Who are we talking about?
Obama.
Okay.
But
not Trump.
When it
Biden.
Comes to what it takes, he is very good in speaking softly, but he's carrying a toothpick. Okay? If you don't carry a big stick, if you don't demonstrate that you're willing to use the big stick, because carrying it is not enough, you have to demonstrate that you're willing to use it. You can't afford to speak softly.
And I also recommend, guys, listen to the previous episode we did with Professor Shiftan, because we talked about that also a lot. I'm
trying to understand. So it's the same mistake that Chamberlain made. It's like it's appeasement at all costs.
Not as bad.
Trying to leverage.
Not as bad as Chamberlain.
Yeah.
I mean, but it's in the same direction. He was not willing to take on the tough part that you need when you're the President of the United States in order to also have the soft part. If you have the tough part, if you have the big stick, if you're willing to use the big stick, you can speak softly. You can do a lot of good. You can help a lot of nations. And I'm for it. It's very important. But if you don't have the big stick, nothing else. Look at Europe. Here is the second largest economy in the world. Here is a continent that all of us, every value that the three of us cherish, we've learned from the Europeans in the final analysis. Okay, as Jews, we can say that they learned it from Isaiah. That's a good excuse, but not really.
They practiced.
Not really.
Yeah.
They have developed the open society system. They have developed pluralism, liberalism, everything we enjoy today. But look at Europe. What is the impact of Europe in the world? And again, I may have said it last time because I didn't change my mind on the subject. Europe can afford to be Europe as long as America is America. If America becomes Europe, who will defend Europe? I mean, you can live in La La Land if somebody else is the responsible adult.
Canada.
Huh? Yeah, look, the Canadians have contributed when push came to shove.
Yeah,
when you go back to D-Day, the Canadians were there.
Yeah.
Okay, so
but
only 2 beaches out of the 10, but
give credit where it's due.
Yeah,
okay?
They were there.
We love you, Canada.
And what I'm trying to say about Obama is he had a very systematic paradigm. I'm not saying that he didn't know what he was doing. I'm saying that unfortunately he was very consistent in doing the wrong thing. Because the message to Iran, it's instead of, we'll break your neck, now you want to talk. Let's be nice and
civilized.
Let me give you only one example. The best negotiators in the world are the Iranians. Who does Obama send to negotiate with the Iranians? John Kerry. He may have had major advantages when it comes to height or the tone of his voice, I don't know. But as a negotiator, as somebody who knows what he's talking about, it's a joke to send him to negotiate with the Iranians.
So before we dive into current events, I have another big picture question. Because you talked about how smart the Iranians are as a nation.
They are.
Okay, so here's what I want you to solve for me, this problem, this conundrum. If they are so smart, history teaches us that plotting of world domination is catastrophic, right? We saw what happened from Genghis Khan to Hitler to the USSR. It always ended badly. And you see that the nations that focused on self-improvement, right? On becoming the best of themselves with what they have, like the United States, for example, except for the part when they murdered all the locals. But let's put this aside.
Caveat.
Those are the nations that flourished, right? So how come instead of taking what they have and becoming the best country in the world, they focus all their resources on those stupid endeavors, pointless, and leaving their people in poverty and now to death with the coronavirus?
You're arguing something very funny. Rationality. Are you married?
No.
That's why you still believe in rationality. Okay. You assume that people do what's good for them. You don't understand the combination between barbarism and a very sophisticated way of trying to bring about your objectives. The two can cohabitate. I mean, look at the Germans in the Second World War. You had a barbaric leadership with a very impressive people. This is what made them very dangerous, because the Nazi party could mobilize the abilities of the German people and have enormous achievements that made them very strong. Okay? Now, if I were to come to the Iranians and make a very rational argument saying, why do you need to do it with bombs and terrorism and nuclear things? You are so capable scientifically. You are so fit to deal with the challenges of the 21st century. You're 80 million people in the Middle East. You'll dominate this region
with
simply,
money.
Not just with money, with your abilities.
Yeah.
With your abilities. Money is only an instrument. Science, technology is only an instrument. Mm-hmm. Your abilities, your society. But this is not, if you study world history without assuming that people do things that end up badly, you wouldn't be able to understand human history. Okay? And by the way, not the individual history. Think of your friends. How many of them? Think of yourself. How many of your decisions are motivated by your logical conclusion, and how many of them are motivated by your psychological needs? Sometimes psychopathological needs. Not you, of course, but others. Okay? But what I'm saying is, yes, the Iranians are a very able people. Yes, the present regime is barbaric. And yes, I hope that one day, I don't know if it'll happen tomorrow or in 30 years, they will realize that this is counterproductive for the Iranian people. But it's very difficult to rise up against it. Now, here's the difference between Iranians and Americans. When Arab society takes over from corrupt Arab regimes, the society is in such a bad state that the society is worse than the most distorted regimes.
Yeah.
Okay? Can you imagine somebody more destructive than Gaddafi in Libya? Very difficult to imagine. And yet,
they miss
when
him.
he was overthrown and the Libyan society took over, it got worse. Okay? What are the options in Egypt? Muslim Brothers or military dictatorship? Okay? Why am I supportive, very supportive, of the military dictatorship in Egypt? Exclusively because the Muslim Brothers are much worse.
In America, on the other hand,
it's a common misconception, right, in foreign policy to think that these countries are hijacked by, barbaric megalomaniacs who are sitting at the top, controlling an otherwise peaceful, good people.
No, it is. I think it is misleading when you speak about the Arabs, but not when you speak about the Iranians. Iran is hijacked by this leadership because there is something in the Iranian people that you can very much respect. And if they get rid of this leadership, there will be a different Iran. In the final analysis, look, if we could just look 100 years from now, I would be with Obama, because basically what he said, why should I have allies like the Saudis and the Egyptians when I can have allies like the Iranians? Disregarding the fact that barbarians are in control of Iran. I can understand why from an American point of view, indeed from an Israeli point of view, Iran could be the best ally of Israel. Actually, if you look at the Middle East today,
it was the best ally of Israel.
It was not the best ally,
One
but it was a good ally of Israel. But one day, when you look at the Middle East, I think the Jews and the Iranians are the two impressive peoples in this region. Before Erdogan, I used to say the Iranians, the Turks, and the Israelis. Now, when Erdogan proved that the Turkish people, the majority of the Turkish people, support this Muslim brother, this very dangerous and, again, barbaric leader, I'm not so sure. In Iran, one day, it may take a long time, but one day we may have a different leadership. But as long as Iran is what it is today, you cannot say in 1943, let's treat Germany like in 1945. Okay? When you burn Berlin, when you occupy Germany, when you denazify the German people, then they can be your allies. When they become a democratic nation, as they did, they can be your ally. But before you burn Berlin, you first have to burn Berlin. Okay? Mm-hmm. You can't bring about a change in Germany, and you cannot today bring about a change in Iran by being nice to the regime. Iran and the civilized world have a zero-sum game. Whatever is bad for Iran is good for civilization. It is good for the United States, it is good for Europe, it is good for Israel, it is good for everybody. Whatever is bad for Iran, whatever makes the Iranians suffer, whatever makes them less capable of pursuing what they're doing now, is good for us. Okay? Now, the problem with Obama was that he believed that he could change Iran by being nice to it. They don't use the word appease anymore, so they call it engagement, so they call it dialogue. So they have other names for something that is essentially the same thing.
Same shit.
If you have an enemy, make it suffer. Okay? Whatever is bad for your enemy is good for you.
Eitan is so happy. It's like, Eitan's like, Dan for president.
So let's talk a little bit about current events, right?
Okay. Now we can speak about current events.
Now it was the introduction, guys.
Yeah.
We've been setting the stage.
Okay.
But tell us a bit about what's happening now with the Biden administration re-entering these deals. Do you foresee them basically folding to every demand and going back into the deal, whatever the conditions are? Or is there an obstacle?
I think the jury is still out.
Okay.
First of all, the radical elements in the Democratic Party, the so-called progressives, have not managed to dominate the foreign affairs scene. I feel much better when Susan Rice is not foreign secretary or secretary of state, when Bernie is not making many decisions, or at least I can't see him. So the people are less ideologically committed than under Obama. I think they will not try again. They don't have an appetite for another failure on the Israeli-Palestinian scene. So something as ridiculous as John Kerry tried to do here in 2014, to bring about in 9 months peace between Israel and the Palestinians. So ridiculous. I mean, it is one of the dumbest things that I could possibly imagine.
Don't underestimate them.
This I don't think is coming back. Concerning Iran, yes, they're eager to reach an agreement with Iran. They're eager to do it for a good reason, but the way is not the good way. They want to disengage from the Middle East, and I think they're right. And by the way, from an Israeli point of view, I think it's a good idea. I don't want the Americans here. I want them supporting the pro-American allies in the region, not being here. I don't want American soldiers. America cannot digest, cannot stomach another war in the Middle East. The failure in Iraq, the failure that you could foresee, not coming and destroying the army of Saddam Hussein, but this dumb notion of bringing democracy to the Middle East. Democracy in the Middle East sounds like military intelligence or good morning or Israeli patience. It's an oxymoron. Okay, there is no such thing. Military intelligence, Israeli patience, Arab democracy, good morning. This idea, this war made it impossible for the United States to conduct another war or to reliably threaten another war. So I don't want the Americans here. I don't want American forces here. I want them to go to the South China Sea. This is where the real story today is taking place. I want them to understand that the best thing that ever happened to them is Israel, because it is both very strong and determined, and it's not doing it for the United States. It is doing it for itself. And the byproduct is something that the Americans can benefit from. And if the Israelis can work with the Saudis and with the Emiratis and with the Kuwaitis and the Bahrainis and the Sudanese and the Moroccans and so on, and the Egyptians and the Jordanians, so much the better. So there is no more Israel on the one hand and the Arabs on the other hand, but a coalition of Israelis and Arabs, an Israeli-Arab coalition, encompassing most of the Arab world, against the radicals in Tehran and in Ankara. And that's a good thing from an American point of view. Is it now different because Biden is at least willing to listen to the Israeli concerns? He may not want to pursue it, yes, but he's willing at least to listen. Obama simply cheated Israel. Okay, he went behind Israel's back and cheated Israel. Biden is willing to listen. Biden, again, doesn't have an ideology of, abandoning the position of the United States. Being weak with him is not an ideology. Maybe it will be the product of his policy. I don't know. It's too early to say. But it is not something that he seeks. So, can Israel have an impact? Yes. And Israel should have an impact in two ways. On the one hand, to demonstrate, and this is what we're doing, whatever you negotiate with the Iranians, we kill them. Okay? We destroy their installations. We hit their ships. We use cyber against them. It's an enemy. You need to have war. Pardon?
Assassinate their scientists.
We didn't assassinate their chief of operations in the military.
No. This is credit to Trump, but it's a good idea. I'm a great believer in. It
was one of the best things he had done in his.
Yes.
I think it's safe to say.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, and it was
real legacy.
It is extremely important, and this is really a personality that is missed.
We're talking about Qasem Soleimani.
Mm-hmm. Yes,
guys. If you don't, I'm talking. For the audience.
So what I'm saying is, on the one hand, we say whatever you negotiate, we bomb. Okay. On the other hand, listen to us, listen to our concerns, and let us see if we can find a way. A, that you will take into account what we're doing. B, that you can use the fact that we are belligerent in order to have your diplomacy. I mean, let's think about Obama for a minute. What was the reason that Obama did not capitulate to the Iranians totally 100%? It was the fear of Israeli action.
Yeah.
Okay? We invested billions in building an army, not in order to hit Iran, but in order to frighten Obama that we will hit Iran. Okay? And the only reason he had any leverage whatsoever against Iran was the threat of Israeli action.
They're crazy. The Israelis are crazy.
Yeah. So now on a much, much, much lower level, the Israeli operations are being escalated recently, not only as a signal to the Iranians, but also as a signal to the Americans.
By the way, the action yesterday that we don't know who did it, the explosion, the mysterious explosion.
I believe Zarif in this very exceptional case.
The who?
Zarif,
Zarif.
The foreign minister of Iran.
But it was done when the Secretary of Defense, the American Secretary of Defense, he's here.
Yes.
I was thinking about a scene where he's sitting in the...
Done, I don't think that it was done to coincide with his visit.
No, maybe on the contrary.
I'm
saying maybe he was in the action room.
No.
Spectating.
No. This would implicate the Americans. We shouldn't do it. But I think that the timing was a product of bringing the new centrifuges into work. So you want to cause as much damage.
They had just announced a few days ago that they're starting enriching, and not a day has passed.
Was it also to coincide with the talks that were occurring in Vienna?
Maybe, but this is a secondary consideration.
But
the signaling is both to Iran and to the United States. And here again, let me give you the big picture. We are at war. People underestimate it.
Israel and Iran.
It is a low-intensity war compared to an all-out eruption. But it's high intensity. We bombard thousands of times in Syria, in Western Iraq. Okay? We work clandestinely on a very large scale of actions in order to undermine the Iranian project.
It's more of a proxy war. I mean, we have never set foot
No, that's not a proxy. We do it ourselves. We only don't recognize it.
They have the proxies.
They have the proxies.
Yeah.
But the ship we or someone... It's unclear who.
Yes, the Norwegians.
The Norwegians, apparently, a week ago, it was an Iranian ship.
Yes.
On a mission. But how does a country go about, and because I heard that this reactor that was so badly
It was not a reactor.
The power source in the reactor was damaged. Thus, how does such a thing happen?
I assume it is done through cyber. Look, I wasn't involved. Okay, this reminds me.
We don't believe you.
You remember when we killed Abu Jihad in Tunisia? I happened to be...
It was before our time, I think.
I
think you remember that.
Yeah, we weren't born, I think.
Okay, but anyway, I was speaking on an American television show at the time, and they said, who did it? I said, well, first of all, I have an alibi. I was here, so it wasn't me. And I assume it's Israelis, because his daughter was there and she wasn't raped. His wife was there and she wasn't killed. So it's probably not Arabs. So it must be Israelis. Okay? So we don't take credit for everything we do, but we do it ourselves.
But we are walking on a very thin line, because tomorrow there could be an all-out war and we can all die.
Yes. But if you ask Israelis, are you willing to do what Israel is doing now, knowing that it can lead to war? 70% say yes, which is a very high percentage, because Israelis understand something very fundamental. If we don't do it, in 3 or 5 years, there will be a war that we don't know if we can win.
I don't know. I talked to my mother. She was very worried today.
She's part of the 30%.
So your mother is, part of the 30%.
Yeah.
Which is all mothers, by the way. They're all 30%.
No, but all mothers of nice Jewish kids.
Yeah.
But so
let me
they
ask.
also have nice mothers. So
yeah.
Nice is something I don't communicate with very well.
So another thing that we didn't really mention is the fact that Iran, there was news this week or last week of Iran and China also coming to some trade or economic agreement.
Serious. That's very serious. Now, let me put it this way. We don't know how much of it is going to materialize. And if you're asking me, it is a product of American-Chinese relations. In other words...
Give us like a sentence or two on what it actually was, what the report was.
It is... something that
it's a trade agreement.
The Chinese president visiting Tehran in 2016 signed a draft that was not yet binding. It was something that they worked on. And now in March, the Chinese foreign minister came to Tehran and signed it. And it speaks about Iran supplying China with large quantities of oil at a very reduced price and gas at very reduced prices, and China investing hundreds of billions of dollars over 25 years in Iran. And this could be very, very damaging, but if the Chinese do it, they will find themselves provoking the Americans in a very major way, and also undermining their relations with Israel in a very major way. I'm not saying the Chinese can't afford to do it vis-a-vis Israel, but it will be part of the American-Chinese picture. And the Iranians are going into a very dangerous area, and the Iranians are smart enough to understand it, of China taking over Iran, because China has taken over large portions of Africa and some portions of South America. And the Iranians know that the Chinese are not doing it out of benevolence.
They don't like Muslims
Chinese
very much.
Are extremely dangerous. So is it something that both the Chinese and the Iranians want to blow up so that the Americans see and make concessions on other fields? Yes. Is it something that they're both going to do on this scale? I don't think so. Anyway, it's still open.
It seems like since we've been here last time, a year and a half ago, so many things happened.
In the Middle East, you have in 1 week approximately what you have in a decade.
Yeah.
In America, let alone, in other places.
But really, things happen here that haven't happened for decades.
Mm-hmm.
Were you surprised with the peace agreements? Do you share the notion that it's just normalization, it's not big deal?
No.
Many
it's
people
a huge
say,
deal.
and just now I saw a video where the spokesperson of the foreign affairs in America, he said he wouldn't call them the Abraham Accords. He wouldn't want to say that they don't recognize the fact that it's a peace plan even. Joe Biden's people.
Look, it has enormous significance, and I've already explained why. Because I'm writing an article now, and this is the name of the article, and the name of the article is The Beginning of the End of the Arab-Israeli Conflict. And what I'm saying in the article is the following, that the peace treaty with Egypt was the end of the beginning of the Arab-Israeli conflict, because the most important Arab state made peace with Israel. And now it is the beginning of the end, because, as I said before, there is no Israel vis-a-vis the Arabs. There is no the Arabs anymore. Now, we've never had it Israel vis-a-vis the Arabs, because it was always Israel and most Arabs against the radical Arabs. But the other non-radical Arabs were not willing to openly cooperate with Israel against the radicals because they were afraid of the radicals. Today, the non-radical Arabs are saying the radicals are frightening us anyhow. So at least let us cooperate with the only power in the Middle East that is both able and willing to stop them, because the Israelis are determined to stop them, and the Israelis are strong to stop them. The Americans are strong, but not determined. Europe is nothing. Okay, so it's not even part of the picture, because I don't think they even bothered to think about it, because they made themselves such a non-entity. But if they think what will help us defend ourselves against the Iranians, it is we can trust Israel more than America. We need America more than Israel, but we already know that the Americans can forsake us. Look at what Obama did, and Biden may be doing something similar.
When you say Europe, do you include the United Kingdom?
Well, first of all, congratulations to Britain that it's no longer part of Europe. I think it was a good decision.
It saved many lives with COVID. It saved many lives with COVID.
Yes, but this is not my prime consideration. But look, the Brits have gone with the Americans on a number of things, and they're not as bad as others in Europe, and nobody is as bad as the European Union. I mean, perhaps the Swedes and the Irish, but mostly...
The San Marinoians are pretty
well
devilish.
Maybe they will send their fleet.
Yeah,
we need a Swiss admiral to lead their armada and an Austrian aircraft carrier. We have in Europe a collection of states that on the one hand is the greatest achievement of civilized humanity in the last and this century, namely turning Europe from a slaughterhouse into a peaceful continent. I have tremendous respect for that. A very special guy, Ron Prosor. He used to be our ambassador in the United Nations and the Director General of the Israeli Foreign Ministry, and also the ambassador to Britain. And today I brought him to my class at Tel Aviv University to speak.
Oh, nice.
And he speaks German.
Guys, we paused the recording, but as we paused, Professor Shiftan started speaking on the phone, fluent German.
Yeah,
and
made us
Hebrew,
both a little bit
Hebrew, which is very surprising.
Yes.
Around this time of year, it's a little unnerving to hear that.
Well, let me tell you something about that, and you can then decide if you want to erase it from your podcast.
No.
Exactly a year ago, I was speaking to high-ranking German staff officers that I teach strategic thinking. And I told them that I would like to see a much stronger German military and a much stronger public support for a strong German army. And I said, I'm saying this as a Jew because I realize that today you're a democratic country and my enemies are different now, and I would want Germany to be stronger militarily. So one of the guys there tells me, well, you must understand, we had a trauma in the Second World War. I said, you wouldn't believe it, but even we had a small trauma in the Second World War. But you need to ask yourself, what can defend the good guys today? And I told him the story about the previous Yom HaShoah, where I brought the German military attaché to my class in the university, and I asked him to come in uniform on Yom HaShoah. Mm-hmm. And we had a discussion that I started on the difference between guilt and responsibility. I said, your generation doesn't have guilt, but your generation has responsibility. So let's discuss it, and let me hear from you, from the German military attaché. Okay? And I told them in Germany this story to say, we need to defend ourselves. Weakness is always bad for the good guys. And very often the Germans tell me, we have learned from Hitler that force is a bad thing. And my answer to them is always, I've learned from Hitler that a lot of force, sometimes even brutal force, used by the good guys is a good thing. Because there are two options. Either the good guys break the bad guys, or the bad guys break the good guys. So let's make the good guys strong. Okay? This is my lesson of Hitler. The good guys should be strong, and they should bomb the shit out of the enemy.
And what do you say to people who would hear that and say that's a relic of foreign policy? That's, your thinking is 50, 100 years old.
Certain things don't grow old. Okay? Let me tell you something. At the time of the Roman Empire, I was young, relatively speaking. But let me say something that I think originates from this time. Si vis pacem, para bellum. He who wants peace, prepare for war. Mm-hmm. Some things don't change. Okay?
We heard the same words from Robert Aumann many years ago when he was on the podcast.
Si vis pacem, para bellum.
Yes.
Wow. So what's going to happen, Professor Shiftan, with Iran?
When's the shit going to hit the fan?
Well, I don't know if it will erupt.
You're fired.
I don't know if it will erupt into major war immediately. What I can say is that not only I have no doubt whatsoever, but there is a very, 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 very wide Israeli consensus about the understanding that when it comes to the Middle East, the choices are not between the good and the bad. They are between the repulsive and the catastrophic. Always choose the repulsive in the Middle East because the alternative is the catastrophic.
I can relate to this.
Is a military dictatorship in Egypt a good thing? No. It would be much nicer if we would have had Florence Nightingale as president of Egypt, and the Tooth Fairy would be the minister of foreign affairs, and we can all ride into the sunset and live happily ever after.
And keep doing the drugs we're doing.
But the alternative is the catastrophe of the Muslim
chaos.
Desert.
Yeah.
The alternative with Iran is try to prevent them from preparing the means that they need in order to make war unwinnable for Israel. Try it now. Hope that it doesn't lead to war. Be very careful, but still very, very consistent. First of all, be determined. And also be careful. But first of all, be determined.
But if we fail in preventing them from acquiring...
Then a war now is much better than a war in 5 years.
And if we fail, even with a war in preventing them from acquiring nuclear weapons?
The nuclear weapons are not the focus of my interest. The nuclear weapons have only it's very important. The objective of the nuclear weapons is to give the Iranian regime immunity. I think they're wrong. They think that if they have nuclear weapons, they will have immunity. They're wrong about it, but they think that this is what will give them. The real threat is that they will prepare an infrastructure of the kind that with a multitude of missiles that will saturate even the best anti-missile defense system. And Israel has the best missile defense system ever in human history. Okay? Even this can be saturated, and they want to saturate it with hundreds of thousands of accurate, long-range, heavy payload missiles. And if we let them build it, if we will not destroy it as we do, a number of times every week, then they can quietly take over one Arab state after another until it is too late.
The good old domino theory.
Yes, but I don't need dominoes for it, okay? I don't need theories for it. I know what they can do. Look, for instance, if a radical army takes over Jordan now, the Israeli army will physically prevent it, okay? We can't have a radical army sitting on our Jordanian front. Imagine a situation where an Israeli decision maker has to consider whether he responds to something in Jordan that happens very slowly, not one day a dramatic invasion, but very slowly a takeover of Jordan. And if Israel does something, thousands of missiles will hit Tel Aviv with heavy payloads. Will it destroy Israel? No. Will it very, 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 very seriously damage the Israeli success story? Yes. So, you don't want to let them have this infrastructure in Syria. So, you hit it a number of times every week. And if it leads to war,
so be it.
It's better to have the war now than in 3 years. But if you don't do it, namely if you Obamanize the Israeli strategy, then you're doomed. Then it's over. Okay? And here you have, notice one very interesting thing. We had 4 election campaigns. What didn't come up? Any disagreement about security. Any disagreement about Iran. There is a complete consensus on the subject. Mm-hmm. Because Israelis are not nice. I mean, this is what makes it possible for me to sleep at night. I've never suspected Israel of being nice. We found a way to be Sparta towards our enemies and Athens towards the inside. Okay? It's a very tricky combination. You see, the Arabs have failed because they have Sparta from the outside and Sparta for the inside. Europe is incapable of defending itself because it is Athens on the inside and Athens on the outside. We have combined the two. And on the one hand, Israel is the freest country. I mean, we border on anarchy. Okay? And on the other hand, we have taken the advice of Johnson when he spoke to Kennedy. Kennedy said, you have to reach the hearts and minds of people. Johnson is reported to have responded, once you've got them by the balls, their hearts and minds will follow. Okay? This is more or less the essence of my Weltanschauung. Okay? If you don't have them by the short and curly hair, you're doomed, because you're surrounded by barbarians. Some of the Arabs are not, and we cooperate with them. Okay? But the radical Arabs, the Iranian regime, the Turkish regime, we are surrounded by barbarians, among others. Okay? So let's cooperate with the relatively good guys that may not be nice against the perfectly bad guys that threaten our existence.
It's a good note, I think, Eitan, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Lots of food for thought you've given us. We really appreciate the time.
Bon appetit.
Thank you. Before we go, so first of all, this what can we recommend? Like your articles?
You on Twitter?
I will have. When is it going to air?
Hopefully tomorrow.
That's too soon. I'm writing an article now.
Okay.
That I would have recommended, but
in English?
Yes.
And where will it appear?
If it is only between us and you will not
air. No, I
so
say
later.
you
So
can't
later.
share it. Later
Okay.
we'll talk. But look out for Dan
but
Shiftan on the internet.
This book, this is only a blueprint of it. When it is translated into English, here is something interesting. I wanted to write an update to the national objectives of the Jewish people. Since the beginning of Zionism and the State of Israel until today, and I wanted to update it. I said, well, in the last decade, a lot of things happened. I wanted to update it. And then I looked for something to update, and I realized that in the last 150 years, nobody wrote anything on the subject.
Mm-hmm.
So I've written a book on this with a very, very broad perspective. And to give you only a few examples, it starts with the objective of bringing the Jewish people back to history. Because in our exile, we were not functioning as a people in history. The second objective is to bring the Jews to Israel. When the State of Israel was established, we were 6% of the Jewish people. Today, we're 46% of the Jewish people. And in a few years, we will inevitably become the majority of the Jewish people, because in the American Jewish community, you have a lot of assimilation and very few children. And in Israel, you have zero assimilation and a very high number of children. Disregard the ultra-Orthodox, okay? Just speak about the constructive part about Israel. We have more than 3 children per family. So it's enormously high. So this is a perspective, concentrating the Jewish people in history and in Israel. And it's fascinating because one of the greatest objections to it came from the American Jewish leadership, and particularly from somebody who used to be for 12 years the president of the Zionist organization, Nahum Goldman. And he argued
passed
that
a long time
Israel, not so long ago, in the mid-1970s, I was surprised. I thought that this is what he said in the 20s.
Mm-hmm.
But even in the 70s, he said Israel should not be a sovereign state. Because if Israel is a sovereign state, it will have interests. And these interests may clash with the interests of the United States. And then the Americans will accuse the Jews in America of dual loyalty. So let Israel not be a sovereign state. And then he said that Israel should be defended by a small international army. And the major role in this international army should be Arabs. And the Arabs will defend Israel, and this will psychologically compensate them for the fact that we took away an Arab land. Okay? And this was for 12 years the president of the Zionist organization.
What a guy.
Okay, wow. What a guy. So when you go back 150 years, as I did, and also speak about the Iranians and what we spoke today, and this is, I think, I'm not objective.
Yeah.
This is about to be translated into English.
What's the name of the book?
The name in Hebrew is The National Objectives of Israel, an Overall Perspective.
Okay.
Okay. And it is published by the INSS. This is the institute next to Tel Aviv University.
Yeah.
That is the most outstanding.
National Security.
Yes, the most outstanding Israeli think tank about national security. And this particular copy is part of the Israeli National Security College, because now this is what they're going to teach in the National Security College. So next time you come,
we'll
you'll have
one about the book,
English version, and we can discuss the book.
Perfect. So before we go, we're sponsored by Masa. So guys, check out Masa. They have amazing programs here in Israel, and it's highly recommended. Go
specifically masaisrael.org/Two Nice Jewish Boys, TWO Nice Jewish Boys, masaisrael.org/Two Nice Jewish Boys. Also, we are sponsored by The Forward.
Yes.
A great source for news, opinion, all through a Jewish lens. So check them out, forward.com/2NJB.
And get a discount.
And you get 6 months for $15.
That's very Jewish of you.
Yes. Save some money.
Save a shekel.
Yeah. Also, Arutz Sheva, IsraelNationalNews.com. Check them out. We are published also there. Great source in English for news here in Israel.
We're not only all over the globe, but we're all over the political aisle.
Yes.
Right? We have The Forward, we have Israel National News, and we have ajn.timesofisrael.com, Australian Jewish News. Check them out. ajn.timesofisrael.com.
And like lastly, the Iranians, we are everywhere.
We got our hands in every pocket.
We have proxies. And lastly, guys, we accept donations, so please help us out. Yes. That's very Jewish.
2njb.com/donate.
That is it, Professor Shiftan.
Thank you so much.
Delighted.
Thank you. Bye, guys.